Welcome to Lesson 2, Complete the Square to Get Vertex Form. So far you've been learning how to factor, and you've been factoring by grouping. What we're going to do here is we are going to first complete the square of a quadratic to get it into a perfect square form, and then we're going to use our factoring skills in order to factor it. What you're going to find in this example is that you will end up factoring it and putting it in vertex form. If you remember from last quarter, we can graph quadratics when they're in vertex form because then we know the vertex. So we're just expanding your toolbox with some different methods of how to write quadratics in order to get the information that you need, whether it's graphing or finding x-intercepts. It's just more tool for you. So let's review. Up here we have standard form written as ax squared plus bx plus c, and this is what you have been factoring lately in this form. We are actually going to be looking at taking standard form to vertex form by completing the square. And here's vertex form. Remember that we have some constant a, which is like a slope, and then we have x minus h squared. H is our x coordinate of the vertex, and remember that's always the opposite. And then we have plus k on the end, and k is the y coordinate of our vertex. So let's begin. Here we have the steps for writing a quadratic in vertex form. So as we go, you may want to pause this video and write the steps down as we go through each one. Up here we have a quadratic, x squared plus 12x plus 32. Now we could factor that like we normally do, or we could complete the square to write it in vertex form. So let's go ahead and do that. So the first step says put all x terms on one side and all constant terms on the other. Well, 32 is our constant term, so let's go ahead and subtract the 32. So we have subtracted the 32 from this side, which means we need to subtract it from the right side. And then let's go ahead and write what we have left. So we have x squared plus 12x. And then I'm going to leave a space here, and then on the right side we have a negative 32. So I left a space here because this is where we're going to be putting a number that will help us complete the square, and you'll see what that is in just a minute. So let's go ahead and look at step 2. Step 2 says complete the square by taking 1/2 of the coefficient of the x term and then squaring it. So our x term is right here, this 12x, right? This is our x squared term, which is different than our x term. So let's go ahead and do that. So here we have our 12, and we're going to take half of that, it says, which gives us 6, and then we'll square it to get 36. So if you think about what we're doing, we're finding a number that's half of this, and then we're squaring it to get the 36. So our new equation is going to look like this. X squared plus 12x, and now we have this 36 here. So we're going to plus 36, and this is going to create a perfect square for us, and I'll show you what that means. And it equals negative 32. Now some of you may have already figured out we have a problem here. You can't just add something to one side without adding it to the other side, otherwise you upset the equality of the equation. So if we have the plus 36 here, then we need to do plus 36 on the other side. We'll just move this over a little bit in order to make sure our equation still balances. So let's add plus 36 to this side. So that brings us to step 3. Add the perfect square number to both sides of the equation, which is what we just did. We added the 36 to the left side and we added the 36 to the right side. Now let's go ahead and simplify. So our equation is now x squared plus 12x plus 36 equals 4. Negative 32 plus 36 equals 4. So this is a perfect square right here on the left, the x squared plus 12x plus 36. And I'll show you, like I said, what that means. But what it is that if you have a perfect square, you have a shortcut for factoring. And we'll go over that in just a minute. So let's look at step 4. Step 4 says factor the quadratic by grouping. And I'm going to use grouping just to show you how to factor it, and then you're going to see something unique about this. So let's go ahead and split up this middle term. So we need to draw our x, if you remember. And in the top of the x, we multiply the 1, whatever's in front of the x squared, times the 36. So we put that there. And in the bottom of our x, we use our middle term, 12. And then we ask ourselves, what times what is 36? That adds to be 12. And we know that is 6 times 6, right? 6 times 6 is 36, and 6 plus 6 is 12. So when we factor this now, we can write this as, well, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and split up our middle term. So we are going to split this into 6x plus 6x. And then we'll write the rest of our quadratic. So we have plus 36. And on the left side, we have this plus 1x squared. And now we can factor by grouping. So let's take our first group and our second group and factor out our greatest common factor. So in our first group, we have an x we can pull out. And then we're left with x plus 6. In our second group, it looks like we have a positive 6 that we can pull out, and then we're also left with x plus 6. And don't forget about our 4 here on the end. So now we still have our two groups. Let's pull out once again our greatest common factor, which is the x plus 6. So we can pull that out. What's left in our first group is just the x, and what's left in our second group is just the 6. Now here's what I'm talking about. Notice that our factors are identical. They are x plus 6 times x plus 6. This is what I mean about completing the square. When you have a perfect square, you end up with the exact same factors. So these are really easy to get when you think about what the 6 is. The 6 is just half of the 12. So your shortcut would always be to take half the 12 and write your two factors. And when you write these, to put them in vertex form, since they're exactly the same, you can write them as x plus 6 squared, since you have two of those. So we'll use this shortcut on the next one. Now let's go to step 5, just says move all terms to the same side to write it in vertex form. So that would just mean we would want to move the 4 back over to the left side so that we can write our equation in vertex form. That would be x plus 6 squared minus 4 equals 0. And I can look at this now and I can pick out my vertex in case I wanted to graph it. And my vertex would be opposite of 6 here, so we have negative 6. And then we have negative 4 is our y, and that's our vertex if we were to graph this. Okay, let's try one more example, and this time we'll go ahead and use the shortcut now that you know what completing the square is and what a perfect square is in order to factor it quickly. So, first step, put all x terms on one side and all constant terms on the other. So we'll move this 16 to the other side, this time by adding it, because we always do the opposite. And we end up with x squared plus 6x, and we'll leave a gap here, is equal to 16. Step 2 says complete the square by taking 1/2 of the coefficient of the x term and then squaring it. So we're talking about our 6 here. So let's take half of the 6, which is 3, and then if we square it, we end up with 9. So a 9 is what we're going to plug in here. So we end up with x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 16. But remember that we have to add the perfect square to both sides, so we need to add the 9 to the right side as well. So let's go ahead and simplify this now. So our final equation, before we factor it, we have x squared plus 6x plus 9, and then on the right side, if we combine 16 and 9, we get 25. All right, so we're going to now use our special trick in order to factor this. So let's look at this middle term. It's a 6. All we have to do is take half of it, which is 3, and use that as our factor. So we have x plus 3 and x plus 3. And remember that these will be identical. Sometimes they might be minus 3 if this was a negative, but since it's a plus, half of plus 6 is plus 3. And then on the right side, we still have the 25. So we effectively factored this entire quadratic here because it's a perfect square. We factored it into its 2 perfect squares. So now we can write that as x plus 3 squared equals 25. And then our final step, once again, to complete this, is just to write it in vertex form, which means move all the terms to one side. So we're going to subtract 25 from the right and subtract 25 from the left in order to move it over. So our equation in vertex form is x plus 3 squared minus 25 is equal to y, or we can say 0 if we are wanting to solve it. If I want to pick out my vertex, it's going to be opposite of the positive 3, so we have a negative 3, and negative 25. And now I have my vertex. So what you have learned today is how to write a quadratic as a perfect square, and then how to factor it using the shortcut, and then write it in vertex form and able to pick out the vertex. And then in our next lesson, we'll take vertex form and we'll practice solving it to find our x-intercepts.